Hi everyone, this is Isaac Steincamp from the Chess Summit Network. I want to apologize for getting off to a late start again today. This next 2 weeks for me is exam week, and while chess is great and everything, college right now obviously takes precedence. So after the semester is over, I intend to get right back on to my normal times that I schedule videos. But in the meantime, this is Chess Chat 2, and for today's video, I wanted to go over quickly 2 games that I played in G15 time control this week that I thought were kind of interesting. One was you know nice tactical way of gaining space, and then the other one, after a simple trick in the opening, was a matter of endgame technique, which I thought was rather instructive. So in this game, I played white, and it draws a little bit of similarities to a post that I did um, a couple months ago talking about winning with the bishop pair. You may recognize this kind of position, except where my opponent had played bishop to g4, then bishop takes f3. But honestly, this position I don't think is that much better for black anyways, because even though he still retains the bishop pair, his bishop on c8 is blocked in. It's not quite clear where his knight on d7 is going to go, and I still have ways to contest the center. I think the most natural way to do that would be to play a move like c takes d5 and then d3, and then try to play for e4, but I was feeling a little bit adventurous, and given the nature of the fact that this was a g15 ICC game, I went ahead and tried this move d4, with the idea of trying to get like a Catalan set up, at the same time really asking black what is he going to do about the fact that his king is still in the center. So my opponent played the best move, I think, which was e4. And originally I didn't intend to play knight to d2, but I already think then the whole point of having this position where my opponent's c8 bishop's kind of blocked in is kind of defeated, with my c1 bishop being blocked in. I didn't really like knight to e1, and I wanted to be able to get kind of an attacking position should my opponent be able to play d takes c4. I think if I play knight to e1, if I were black, I'd heavily consider this move. So I I'm not quite sure about the move that I played. I was a little bit inspired from Nakamura Anand from the Candidates tournament, which was this move knight to h4. Obviously, there's no g5 with my bishop on c1, but the idea is that because my opponent's bishop is blocked in on c8, maybe knight to f5 becomes an option, and if not, I always have f3. And I think f3 is the more critical way to go. So my opponent played bishop to e7. I played f3 to open up the center while my opponent's king is still on e8. He castled, and I played knight to f5 with the potential of being able to take this dark squared bishop. My opponent realized that he didn't really want to give up his good bishop and played bishop to b4. And I think here I had a little bit of an inaccuracy and played this move a3, pushing the bishop back to a5, which is probably where it wants to go anyway, seeing that d6 is not a viable option. And I think here, if I just played bishop to f4 and then maybe a3 later, this would have caused a little bit more, problems, I think, for black. But okay, a3 is not a bad move. I played this, I think, rather quickly. He played bishop to b5. I played bishop f4. He played bishop to c7. Here I decided to take on e4. The idea being that if he plays bishop takes f4, I can do a rook lift, and if he plays knight takes e4, I can quickly undermine it and give black an isolated pawn. My opponent realized this and played d takes e4, but now I have a nice space advantage, because even though my opponent has a pawn on e4, my pawns on c4 and d4 do a nice job controlling some key critical squares in the 5th rank. It's not quite clear how my opponent's knight on d7 will get into the game, and my opponent really can't play this move bishop takes f4. So I use these next few moves to develop. Knight to c3, rook to e8 is kind of forced, rook to c1, just putting my rook on the c file, preparing for maybe a d5 break. And here, when my opponent played knight to f8, I immediately took the initiative with bishop takes c7, queen takes c7, and d5, because now should the file open, my opponent's queen is heavily misplaced. So he played queen to b6, trying to snag a pawn. And the thing I liked for me about this position is, even though I was down a pawn, I have so much activity that my opponent has actually probably done harm to himself, bringing his strongest piece away from the rest of his army. And now he has to constantly consider moves like knight takes g7, followed by rook takes f6, and then queen d4 check. I don't think they ever worked at any point during this game, but I think, it added another wrinkle to it that made it black's life a little bit more complicated. And here, I was able to fully justify the pawn by playing this move d6, and I was perfectly okay if black played queen takes a3. I thought that this would be a waste of time, and now that I have this passed pawn, knight to e7 is a legitimate threat. Now here, I think black missed an opportunity to try to make the game more interesting with bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, and then queen takes a3. My opponent is going to have a really weak e4 pawn. I'll probably play this move queen to d4 and get ready to sack on f6 or take the e4 pawn. And I still like my position, but I think that this was his best chance to try to get back into equality. By playing bishop to d7, I got a free tempo to play knight e7 check, and now my opponent's bishop on d7 is still a bad bishop and can't really get into the game. So my opponent played king to h8. I took this free pawn on e4. He played knight to g4, and even though he's starting the fork on e3, as easy it would be to react to that, I found an even nicer way to do so. Knight to g5, threatening checkmate on f7, because if knight to e3, knight takes f7, the king has no squares, game is over. So my opponent played bishop to e6, covering the square. I played queen to d3. I was kind of expecting a move like knight to e5 here, but I wasn't really too concerned. I thought I was, still doing fine. He played g6 with the idea of being able to bring his queen back to g7, and here I think I could have taken on f7, but already it's kind of awkward with my rook on c1, and I decided that I'd rather get the b7 pawn and be able to attack on the 7th rank. So rook b1, queen g7, rook takes b7, and now I have pressure on f7 from both directions. And when my opponent played knight to e5, I found a nice little, Zwischenzug, knight takes e6. Now if my opponent takes my queen, I'll take his queen and have a lot of pressure. I'll start pushing my passed pawn. c6 is going to drop. He can't really do this. So he played f takes e6, and after queen to c3, I think my opponent realized how much trouble he was in because it's really hard to find moves. After a move like rook on a to d8, I quickly played c5, solidifying my central advantage, and now it's just impossible to find anything nice. After knight to f d7, without an easy way to defend c8, I was able to grab this pawn, and now my opponent realized that everything falls apart and wound up losing the game on the spot. So, I thought that this was a pretty fun game. I thought that was very instructive how I got a nice space advantage, and at the same time, I think it shows that material doesn't necessarily mean everything. Okay, so for this next game, I want to share. It was a G15 game where I'm playing black, and okay, I'll flip the board. Again, this was on ICC, and same G15 time control. So my opponent went for a Sicilian, but instead of taking with the knight, which is the main line, he played queen takes d4, knight f6, e5, knight c6. This is all theory, but my opponent blundered here with queen to d1. There are only two viable moves in this position that don't lose material, and I'm about to show why. Queen to c3 and queen to a4, I think, are the only moves that work, and when you play a move like queen d1, you always need to ask yourself, what are the tactics? The queen's already moved twice, and it's not quite clear why it moved twice, and because we have a better developmental advantage and our c-pawn is not on the board, we can play knight takes e5, exclam, knight takes e5, queen to a5 check, and we pick up this pawn. Now, even though we're up a pawn, we still need to be a little bit careful. When my opponent played bishop to e2, I really thought about queen takes b2, but I think after bishop to c3, queen to b6, bishop to d4, I thought my opponent, he's still losing, and I'm sure queen takes b2 is computer-wise the best move, but it's not a practical decision. So I just decided to develop, and I thought that this was more important. He played bishop to c3, queen to c7, knight d2, I played d5. I think d6 is also perfectly fine with the idea of keeping a traditional dragon structure, but at this point I just wanted to kind of push my center and kind of punish white for not having any space. So knight to f3 was played, bishop to g4, getting ready to exchange and try to get to a better endgame. Bishop to e5 was played, queen t7, h3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. I've given up the bishop pair, but after this move e6, it's quite clear that the light squared bishop can't really do too much, so I'm not really worried. After queen d4, knight e8, I was quickly able to exchange, and after c4, I had to see this resource beforehand, knight to f5, and now the idea is that I now have a passed pawn. In reality, this c4 move, or was it here, is probably a mistake because it gives me this ability to get a passed pawn. His only hope was to really hope that the bishop would eventually become better than knight when I start pushing my pawns, and a c3, a c3 pawn would be able to hold d4. But now I have a passed pawn. Okay, so he played rook a d1, e5, here. And I'm not really afraid of bishop g4 followed by bishop takes f5. I think that my central pawn advantage already is enough. So I thought he handled the position correctly. Queen b4. And here, even though my opponent looks like he's trying to generate some counterplay, there's really not that much he can do. And already after b5, I think that that's quite evident. g4, I entered the Zwischenzug, and I got greedy and decided I wanted to get a passed pawn. I thought that this was the right decision because now already it's not so clear how my opponent should play on, and he resigned here. So I thought that this was also kind of instructive because it showed how to push a central mass and how to get that space advantage, being able to roll nicely through. So this was Chess Chat 2. Next week I'll be happy to accept any free game analysis posts or anything, for material for me. I'm going to try to retain that Tuesday and Friday schedule. If not, I'm still going to post twice during the week. I might wait till a Wednesday. Or, I might be looking for like a Norway chess game or a U.S. Chess Championships game to go over on the site next time. If you haven't had the chance, I heavily encourage you guys to watch that Wesley So Gatakomsky game. That knight f5 sack was, pretty devastating, and Komsky was blown off the board really quickly. I also thought Ray Robson had a really nice win over Alexander Onishik. I think, as I put in my projections, I had him over Fabiano Caruana in third place. I don't know how realistic that is to pan it out. I think Wesley So's been a little bit lucky so far, especially with that game against Akshat Chandra, where Chandra missed a move, rook takes e6, check, and winning. But okay, these things happen. And I think Nakamura is already in an interesting position, having already drawn twice, and having to play Caruana today, he falls behind quickly on the scoreboard. Caruana, I think he's in the best position out of the three of the Super GM so far, just because after today he would have played all of them. As long as he can get out of today with at least a draw, I think he's on pace to do rather well. And then I think I'm still going to stick to my predictions. I think it was Nakamura, Wesley So, Ray Robson, Fabiano Caruana, and Sam Shankland. Those are the players that are currently in the top five. So I think I couldn't complain about my projections right now. We'll wait for it to balance out. So this is Isaac Steincamp signing off from the Chess Summit Network. If you want me to cover anything in detail next week specifically, shoot me an email at chess.summit@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to go over your games or questions. Thanks. This is Isaac Steincamp signing off.